What does it mean to be trapped between two empires? To find yourself caught in a relentless tug-of-war between East and West, a pawn in a game far larger than your small nation. Finland's story begins exactly here, on a land where fate did not ask for permission, but brutally imposed its will. How did a people without a state for centuries manage to endure when mighty empires crumbled around them? The answer lies in choices made at impossible crossroads, and the silent strength forged in isolation. Friends, be sure to subscribe to my Quiet History channel, like it, and leave a comment of at least 7 words. This is necessary for the channel to function. Share this video with others if you think it's important. Thank you. 12,000 years ago, the glaciers receded, unveiling a rugged landscape of rocky hills, endless lakes, and unforgiving soils. This land, once a frozen frontier, became home to the first hunters of reindeer, fishermen, and gatherers. Simple people, with no inkling they would witness the collision of great powers. They did not choose their destiny. They survived the brutal climate where summers were brief and winters stretched half the year. Nature here was unforgiving, punishing weakness without mercy, yet rewarding those who mastered patience and resilience. By the dawn of the Common Era, the forebears of the modern Finns had already rooted themselves deep in these forests. These tribes spoke languages of the Finno-Ugric family, linking them not to the south or west, but reaching far into the eastern wilderness, relatives to Hungarians, Estonians, and the Sami peoples. Finnish was unlike the tongues of neighboring Swedes or Russians. It echoed an ancient world with its 15 grammatical cases, the absence of gender, and a unique agglutinative form. This language was both a fortress and a riddle, a silent declaration of identity that would shield them through centuries of turmoil. Then came the Vikings. In the 8th century, Swedish seafarers and warriors surged eastward across the Baltic Sea, their eyes set on uncharted lands and new riches. They dubbed this territory Österland, the Eastern Land. Slowly, the Vikings established trading posts, demanded tribute, and claimed dominion. Yet Finland's dense forests and treacherous lakes defied easy conquest. The locals resisted fiercely. No swift victory awaited the invaders. The Finns adapted, learning to navigate the shifting tides of power and influence. They absorbed new technologies, religious ideas, but never surrendered their language or customs. Their survival depended on a delicate balance between assimilation and resistance, a precarious tightrope walk on the edge of empire. From the east, another force loomed. Novgorod's merchants and warriors pushed northward, driven by economic ambition and orthodox expansion. The eastern lands of Karelia, part of Finnish territories, fell under Novgorod's sway. Fortresses rose, tributes were collected, and the orthodox faith was imposed on the local populations. Here, Finland was no longer a land of solitude, but a battleground for influence between Novgorod and Sweden. Two worlds clashed, and caught in between was a people struggling to preserve their very essence. The 12th century marked a pivotal turn. The Catholic Church, not content with crusades to the Holy Land, now sanctioned campaigns against the pagan peoples of the Baltic. In 1155, according to Swedish chronicles, King Erik IX, known as Erik the Holy, led an expedition into Finland. His mission was one of brutal clarity, to convert the heathens and cement Swedish dominion. This event, later dubbed Finland's First Crusade, remains shrouded in legend and sparse records, but symbolically it marked the opening of a new chapter, one of religious warfare, cultural conquest, and irreversible transformation. Finland was no longer just geography. It had become a stage where empires collided, where every decision bore the weight of survival or annihilation. Between the iron grip of Sweden to the west and the orthodox reach of Novgorod to the east, the Finnish people faced choices that would define their future. Would they succumb to the pressures of conquest, or would they forge a path beyond empires? Their answer lay in silence, an unspoken strength that echoed louder than any sword's clash. This story is not just about land or kings, but about the human heart caught in the storm of history. The Finns learned to endure by listening to the forests, by mastering patience in a harsh climate, and by holding fast to a language and identity that no conqueror could erase. Their tale is a testament to resilience, a reminder that sometimes survival itself becomes the greatest victory. As the centuries unfolded, Finland's fate would continue to be shaped by the relentless struggle between East and West. But how did these early centuries set the stage for what was to come? And what lessons can we draw from a people who learned to be silent warriors, whose quiet defiance shaped a nation? The answers demand we look deeper, beyond the battles and borders, into the very soul of a land forged by choice and by fate. Join Quiet History as we unravel the saga of Finland, where every decision rippled through time, every allegiance tested the limits of identity, and every silent moment shaped the destiny of a nation caught forever between worlds. Subscribe now to witness the drama of choices and consequences that echoed through a frozen land, where history was written not just in wars, but in the quiet strength of its people. What drives a man to kill in the name of faith? Bishop Henrik, an English missionary, marches alongside the Swedish army, destined to become the first Christian martyr and patron saint of Finland. His death at the hands of a Finnish farmer named Lalli, who refuses the new religion, sparks a brutal beginning. Yet even as Henrik falls, Christianity takes root. The shock waves of that fateful clash ripple through Finland's soul, forever altering its destiny. Sweden moves with relentless purpose. They erect churches, install priests, and teach the Finnish people Latin and Swedish. The old gods, Ukko the Thunderer, Ahti, Lord of the Waters, Tapio, Master of the Forests, fading into the shadows, but never vanishing. Instead, these ancient deities dissolve into folk tales, runes, and whispers of the past. This collision of beliefs births a fragile coexistence. Christianity spreads, yet the memory of old gods survives, entwined in the hearts of the Finnish people. This dual faith is no mere hypocrisy, but a survival strategy. To pray to Christ in the church and honor ancestral spirits at home is to cling to identity amid upheaval. How does a nation balance between transformation and tradition without breaking? Finland's soul fractures, yet endures, caught between worlds as the 13th century unfurls in turmoil. At the heart of this chaos stands the fierce contest between Sweden and Novgorod over Finland's future. In the year 1240, Sweden launches its second crusade, moving into central Finland's Häme region. Their goal? to cement control, convert remaining pagans, and halt Novgorod's advance. Led by Jarl Birger, the regent of Sweden, they build the fortress of Tavastehus, later known as Hämeenlinna. But eastward progress meets fierce resistance. Novgorod refuses to surrender. In 1242, Novgorod strikes back. Prince Alexander Nevsky shatters the Swedish forces at the Battle of the Neva, a triumph etched into Russian chronicles as a decisive victory. Yet for Finland, this reverberation is faint, a battle on the margins of a larger war. The conflict grinds on, unresolved and relentless, the fate of a people caught in the crossfire. By the year 1293, Sweden launches a third crusade, this time targeting Karelia. Marshal Torgils Knutsen leads the charge, with a mission to finally push Novgorod back and claim the eastern lands. The Swedes construct the fortress of Viborg on the Karelian Isthmus, a vital stronghold controlling routes to Karelia and Lake Ladoga. Novgorod retaliates with raids, sieges, and counterattacks. The war ebbs and flows, a brutal tug-of-war with no decisive victor. Then, in the year 1323, a fragile peace emerges. In the town of Orekovits, on an island at the Neva's source, Sweden and Novgorod signed the Treaty of Orekovits. It draws the first official border between these powers, dividing Karelia west to Sweden, east to Novgorod. Rivers and lakes mark the uncertain frontiers, but the truce signals a grim compromise. This division cleaves the Finnish people. West Finland falls under Swedish rule and Catholicism, East Finland under Novgorod and Orthodoxy. This line, drawn by swords and ink, will endure for centuries, shaping the very identity of the nation. How does a people survive fractured by faith and empire? Under Swedish dominion, Finland is no mere colony. It is an integral eastern province of a growing kingdom. The Finns gain rights equal to the Swedes. They own land, trade freely, and participate in governance. Unlike the serfs of Russia or the feudal peasants of Central Europe, Finnish farmers remain free, an extraordinary exception. This freedom ignites the Finnish spirit. The man who tills his own soil, answers to no lord, carries within him a stubborn pride and quiet defiance. The backbone of Finnish identity is forged in these fields of independence, a trait that will echo through generations. Sweden actively populates Finnish shores with settlers, farmers, craftsmen, merchants, founding cities along the southwestern coast. Turku, once called Åbo, rises as a vital urban center, anchoring Swedish influence deep in Finnish lands. The rhythm of conquest and settlement beats steadily, advancing the kingdom's reach. By the 17th century, Sweden stands at its zenith, commanding the Baltic Sea and controlling parts of Germany, Poland, and the Baltic states. Finland flourishes in the shadow of this great power, new cities blossoming from the soil. Helsinki emerges as a modest settlement along the southern shore in the year 1550, a quiet seed of future prominence. But beneath this growth, undercurrents of tension pulse. The choices made in church halls and battlefields, the sacrifices of faith and freedom, weave a complex tapestry of identity and power. What price will Finland pay for survival between giants? The story is far from over. Stay with quiet history to witness the relentless unfolding of fate. What happens when centuries of peace shatter overnight? When a nation's fate hangs in the balance, torn between empires? How far will people go when their homeland becomes a battlefield? In the early 1700s, Finland was caught in the deadly crossfire of a titanic struggle between Sweden and Russia, two powers vying for dominance in the Baltic. Its cities, once flourishing hubs of knowledge and culture, were about to face an unimaginable reckoning. Turku, the proud city, stood as a beacon of Finnish learning, home to the bishopric, the university, and the Royal Academy of Åbo, the first higher education institution in Finland founded in 1640. This city nurtured the Finnish elite. They studied theology, law, and medicine, all in Swedish, marking progress, yet still bound to Swedish heritage. But progress was fragile, overshadowed by the growing threat looming at the borders. In the year 1701, the Great Northern War erupted, unleashing chaos. Peter I, Russia's young and ambitious Tsar, launched his assault to wrest control of the Baltic from Sweden and reclaim lost lands. For 21 brutal years, Finland became the front line, a land scorched by war, where entire villages burned and people vanished into captivity. The siege of Viborg in 1713 was a devastating blow. A fortress that stood for 3 centuries fell, signaling a grim new reality. The carnage was catastrophic. The Finns call it the Great Wrath, Isoviha, a period where 1/3 of the population perished or fled. The land lay in ruins, its people shattered. When the war finally ended in 1721, the Treaty of Nystad forced Sweden to cede Viborg, the Karelian Isthmus, Ingria, Estonia, and Livonia to Russia. Finland's eastern borders shrank perilously close to Helsinki. The rise of Russia as a Baltic giant cast a long shadow over the region. What does it mean when centuries of identity are upended in a single stroke of a treaty? For 6.5 centuries, Finland had been an integral part of Sweden, absorbing its laws, culture, language. Now, the Russian Empire's embrace promised something unknown and foreign, a world ruled by an autocratic czar, an orthodox faith alien to many. The old certainty was gone. Sweden, desperate to hold on, poured resources into defense. Starting in 1748, under the watchful eye of Augustin Ehrensvärd, a brilliant Swedish engineer and military leader, they began constructing the fortress of Sveaborg on the islands near Helsinki. A colossal project, it was meant to be an impregnable bulwark controlling the approaches to the Gulf of Finland. The fortress grew for decades, its bastions, barracks, and shipyards a testament to Sweden's determination. But would it be enough to stem the tide? War returned in waves. Between 1741 and 1743, the so-called Little Wrath saw Russian troops invade again, reaching Turku and occupying large portions of Finland. Sweden lost more territory in Karelia. Then, in 1788, King Gustav III launched a desperate war to reclaim lost lands. Battles raged, victories and defeats balanced on a knife's edge. The war ended in a stalemate, but the truth was clear. Sweden was waning, Russia rising. The question haunting Finland was no longer if, but when. When would the inevitable happen? The dawn of the 19th century brought a storm that would forever alter the Baltic map. The Napoleonic Wars upheaved Europe, forging unlikely alliances. After the Treaty of Tilsit in 1807, Russia and France became allies. Napoleon himself acknowledged Russian interests in Finland. In February 1808, Russian troops crossed the border, unleashing the last Russo-Swedish War, one that would shatter centuries of Swedish rule over Finland. The defenses crumbled swiftly. Fortress after fortress fell, cities burned. Sveaborg, deemed impregnable, surrendered without a fight in May 1808. Commander Karl Olof Kronstedt, facing starvation and no reinforcements, chose capitulation over annihilation. Accused of treason, he had no real choice. Turku was lost. Abo was engulfed in flames. By spring 1809, Russia controlled all Finland. On September 17, 1809, Sweden signed the Treaty of Frederikshamn, ceding Finland forever to Russia. The shock rippled through the Finnish people. 650 years of Swedish heritage, law, and language were severed in a cruel instant. What would become of Finland under the Russian Tsar's rule? Would the Finnish people face assimilation, suppression, or something more complex? The once familiar world was gone, replaced by new masters and an uncertain future. The gate to a new era had slammed shut behind them, leaving behind a legacy of irreversible choices and the haunting weight of history's relentless march. If you want to uncover more dark turns of history and the human stories behind monumental decisions, subscribe to Quiet History. What if the fate of a nation hinged on a single decision? Could one man's wisdom prevent the collapse of an empire? Alexander I faced a crossroads, to crush Finland with force or to embrace a fragile compromise. He chose the latter. But at what cost? In March of 1809, the Finnish Diet gathered in the town of Porvoo, a meeting charged with tension and uncertainty. Alexander appeared in person, swearing to uphold Finnish laws and privileges, a pledge that startled many. In return, the Diet swore loyalty to the emperor. This was no mere formality. It was the birth of the Grand Duchy of Finland, an autonomous entity within the Russian Empire. Finland gained its own constitution, rooted in the Swedish laws of 1772, along with its own government, senate, courts, and currency. Remarkably, Finns paid no taxes to Russia and were exempt from military service. They preserved their Lutheran faith, kept the Swedish language alive, and maintained rights no other imperial region enjoyed. This was unprecedented autonomy. But why did Alexander gamble on such generosity? The answer lies in cold strategic calculation. Finland was a buffer zone between Russia and Sweden. If its people remained loyal, they would guard the approaches to St. Petersburg. But if oppressed, rebellion was inevitable, potentially inviting Swedish intervention and chaos. Alexander chose to buy loyalty through freedom. The stakes were immense, and the gamble risky. And it worked. The Finns accepted the new reality, not out of love for Russia, but for the precious autonomy it guaranteed. This fragile peace allowed them to nurture their identity and govern themselves under their ancient laws. Helsinki was named the capital, a symbol of this new order. But Alexander's vision extended further. He demanded a modern European city, a jewel reflecting this new era. Enter Carl Ludwig Engel, a German architect summoned to reshape Helsinki's heart in neoclassical style. His designs, the Senate Square, the cathedral, the university, the government palace, transformed the city into a miniature St. Petersburg. Helsinki was no longer a backwater. It was the gleaming beacon of Finland's future, while old Turku faded into the past. Yet the 19th century was also the age of national awakening. Across Europe, peoples searched for roots, crafting myths and histories to define themselves. Finland was no exception. The elite, long Swedish-speaking and culturally linked to Sweden, began to question their identity. Who were they really? Not Swedes, but Finns, with their own language, their own soul. Central to this awakening was Elias Lönnrot, a doctor and folklorist driven by obsession. In the 1830s, he traveled through Karelia and eastern provinces, recording ancient oral traditions, epic runes and songs passed down through generations, relics from pre-Christian times. These were tales of gods, heroes, magic, and the creation of the world. Lönnrot painstakingly compiled, edited, and wove these fragments into a cohesive epic. In 1835, the first version of the Kalevala was published. By 1849, the final version emerged, a monumental work comprising 50 runes and over 22,000 lines. It told of Vanamoinen, the wise shaman, Ilmarinen, the blacksmith, Lemminkainen, the warrior, and their quest for the mysterious Sampo, a magical artifact promising wealth and happiness. The Kalevala was more than a book. It was Finland's mythic foundation, a heroic saga of love, betrayal, death, and rebirth. It gave the Finns a narrative to bind their people, to claim a history separate from Sweden or Russia. Yet while this cultural renaissance flourished, darker clouds gathered over the Russian Empire itself. Corruption gnawed at the empire's core. Stagnation choked progress. Social inequalities bred resentment. Ethnic tensions festered. Reformers like Alexander II, the liberator of the serfs, sought change, but met violent ends. He was assassinated by radicals in 1881. His successor, Alexander III, reversed reforms, tightening the grip of autocracy. Then came Nicholas II, continuing the harsh policies. The empire pushed toward uniformity, attempting to crush the autonomy of regions like Finland. Each step forward was shadowed by the threat of rebellion, the specter of revolution looming ever closer. The choices made in these years were irreversible, setting the stage for a brutal reckoning that would shake not only Finland, but all of Russia. Could a fragile peace built on compromise survive the tides of empire? Would Finland's hard-won freedoms be crushed under imperial weight? The answers lay in the hands of men driven by fear, ambition, and the desperate hope to control destiny. The stakes could not be higher, nor the consequences more final. This was a world on the brink, where every decision echoed with irreversible consequences. Join us as we unravel the tense, dramatic saga of Finland's fight for identity and autonomy amid the crumbling might of Imperial Russia. The story continues. Subscribe to Quiet History to witness history's most fateful choices. Who decides the fate of a nation? How far will a people go when their freedom is stripped away? In 1899, the Russian Empire made a brutal choice to tighten its grip on Finland. The new Governor-General, Nikolai Bobrikov, was handed extraordinary powers. His mission? To erase Finnish autonomy and fuse the Grand Duchy into the empire. But what price would be paid for such ruthless control? Bobrikov unleashed a wave of repressive policies. The February Manifesto stripped Finland's parliament, the Sejm, of its authority over critical affairs. Finnish laws bowed to imperial decrees. Mandatory conscription into the Russian army was enforced. Russian language forced into administration. Finnish police brought under Moscow's command. The people's anger flared. 500,000 signatures poured into petitions begging Emperor Nicholas for mercy. Yet the Tsar turned a cold shoulder, deaf to their pleas. Bobrikov's iron fist crushed dissent without mercy. Newspapers were shuttered, activists arrested or exiled. The Finnish spirit, however, refused to break. Resistance ignited like wildfire. Draft dodging, sabotage, secret defiance. The tension spiraled toward violence. In 1904, a young Finnish nationalist, Eugen Schoeman, took a fateful stand, shooting Bobrikov at point-blank range before turning the gun on himself. Bobrikov's death sent shockwaves through the empire, but the machinery of oppression did not falter. Instead, it revealed a terrifying truth. The Finns were ready to stake everything, even their lives, for freedom. Meanwhile, Russia's own foundations trembled under the strain of the Russo-Japanese War. Defeat after humiliating defeat plunged the empire into chaos. The old order tottered on the brink of collapse. Faced with revolution and ruin, Nicholas II was forced to concede reforms. The October Manifesto promised a constitution, a parliament, and civil liberties. Finland, caught in this tide, earned a brief reprieve. In 1906, the Finnish Sejm underwent a radical transformation, introducing universal suffrage, the first in Europe to grant women the right to vote and run for office. A triumph of democracy, unmatched even by Britain, France, or the United States. Yet this victory was fragile, fleeting. The Tsar's grip tightened anew. The Russification campaign resumed with vigor. The Finnish parliament was dissolved multiple times. Imperial laws went unheeded. Tensions simmered dangerously. The Finns faced a grim realization. True freedom was impossible under Russian dominion. But how could a small nation break free from a faltering yet formidable empire? The answer lay in patience, or so it seemed. Then, in 1914, the First World War erupted, dragging Russia into a relentless bloodbath. Finnish men were conscripted, fighting on distant fronts. Finnish factories churned out munitions. Finnish farmers fed the armies. Yet Russia's defeats multiplied. The army crumbled. The economy collapsed. Famine stalked the land. In February 1917, revolution exploded, toppling Nicholas and ending centuries of monarchy. The new provisional government promised freedom, reform, and autonomy for Finland. But promises were hollow. The decision was deferred to a constituent assembly that never came. Frustrated, the Finnish Sejm boldly declared itself the supreme authority. Moscow retaliated by dissolving the parliament. The nation stood trapped in a deadly stalemate. Chaos reigned in Russia. In October 1917, the Bolsheviks seized power. Lenin proclaimed the right of nations to self-determination, a beacon of hope for oppressed peoples. Seizing the moment, on December 6, 1917, the Finnish Sejm declared independence. The era of Russian rule was over. Carl Gustav Mannerheim, a Finnish general serving Russia, returned home as the symbol of a new dawn. But freedom came at a heartbreaking price. Finland was deeply divided. Socialists controlled the industrial south, conservatives the rural north. Both sides armed themselves. The Red Guard rose, the White Guard organized. January 1918 exploded into civil war. The Reds seized Helsinki, proclaiming a Finnish socialist republic. The Whites, led by Mannerheim, prepared to fight for the soul of their nation. What would the future hold for this fractured land? Could a young nation survive the violent birth of its freedom? The stakes had never been higher, the choices never more irreversible. The fate of Finland and its people hung in the balance. If you want to witness how these fateful decisions shaped history, subscribe to Quiet History. The story is far from over. What happens when a nation tears itself apart from within? When brother turns against brother, neighbor against neighbor, and fear drives irreversible choices? Carl Gustav Emil Mannerheim rises, organizing resistance in the north, gathering an army, training soldiers for a brutal offensive. But the war is merciless. Every decision echoes with deadly consequences. The Red Guards execute bourgeois and clergy. The Whites retaliate by killing Reds and activists. Germany backs the Whites, sending troops to tip the scales. Russia, engulfed in its own civil war, cannot aid the Reds. By May, the Whites claim victory. The Reds are crushed, their leaders fleeing to Russia or facing execution. The nation bleeds. 37,000 dead, 1% of the population. A wound deeper than Finland's losses in World War II. But victory breeds its own horrors. The White Terror begins, a campaign of ruthless revenge. Thousands are thrown into concentration camps, hundreds executed without trial. Even Mannerheim, the architect of resistance, struggles to restrain the violence, often failing. The country's soul fractures further under the weight of vengeance and fear. Yet from this chaos, Finland rises. A constitution is forged, a republic proclaimed. Mannerheim becomes regent but refuses the crown. Finland demands democracy, not monarchy. In 1919, Carl Ståhlberg, a liberal lawyer, is elected the first president. Democracy takes root amid the ruins, promising a fragile hope. The 20s and 30s become a time of rebuilding. Poverty and destruction linger, but the Finnish people work relentlessly. Industry revives, agriculture expands, schools and hospitals rise from the ashes. Though still largely rural, Finland's cities grow, with Helsinki blossoming into a modern capital. Finnish modernism flourishes. Alvar Aalto's functionalist masterpieces symbolize a nation reclaiming its identity. But shadows loom on the eastern border. The Soviet Union, haunted by the memory of its Civil War defeat, views Finland with suspicion and hostility. Both sides fortify their positions. The Finns build the Mannerheim Line on the Karelian Isthmus, while Soviet troops mass nearby. Tensions escalate as Europe edges toward another catastrophic war. In 1939, Stalin demands territorial concessions, military bases on Finnish soil, a buffer to protect Leningrad. Finland refuses. On November 30th, the Soviet Union invades. The Winter War begins, shocking the world. A giant attacks a tiny nation, expecting a swift victory. Outnumbered and outgunned, Finland fights with desperate courage. Mannerheim, now a field marshal and commander-in-chief, leads the defense. Finnish soldiers, clad in white camouflage, ski silently through the forests, ambushing Soviet columns, destroying tanks with Molotov cocktails. fiery bottles that become a symbol of resistance. Soviet losses mount, but the war's outcome hangs in the balance. After the war, Finland chooses democracy and freedom, holding elections and protecting free speech. Yet its foreign policy remains cautious and delicate. Finland refuses NATO membership, avoids openly siding with the West, and balances its relations carefully. President Urho Kekkonen, ruling from 1956 to 1982, masters this tightrope walk, maintaining good ties with the USSR without sacrificing Finnish values. Finland becomes a bridge between East and West, trading with both sides. Its economy grows and living standards rise. The country transforms from an agrarian society into an industrial, then post-industrial nation. The 60s and 70s bring prosperity and the building of a social welfare state with free education and expanding public services. But beneath this progress lies the legacy of fear and tough choices. Decisions that shaped a nation's fate, forever balancing on the edge between survival and surrender. Finland's story is one of resilience, forged in the crucible of war and the relentless pursuit of freedom. If you want to dive deeper into the untold stories of history, subscribe to Quiet History and join us as we uncover the moments that changed the world forever. What does it take for a nation to survive decades of war, occupation, and shifting empires? How do you make impossible choices when your future hangs in the balance? Finland's story is one of brutal decisions, heartbreak, and unyielding resolve. The weight of history presses down, and every step forward demands sacrifice. For centuries, Finland stood trapped between East and West, caught between Swedish rule and Russian domination. It lost land, endured oppression, and faced humiliation. But through it all, Finns clung to their language, their culture, their identity. Amid the chaos, something deep inside never broke. Sisu, a word that refuses translation. It means grit, stubbornness, an inner strength that pushes you on when all seems lost. Sisu is the pulse of a nation that does not give up. It's the fire hidden behind stoic silence, the will to fight for freedom, even when facing overwhelming odds. When the Second World War shattered Europe, Finland stood its ground, defending its soil, preserving its dignity, not with aggression, but with desperate determination to survive. These choices carved a path through history, but at a cost that still echoes today. By the late 20th century, Finland emerged battered but unbroken. The Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, ending decades of external pressure. Finland seized a chance to redefine itself, joining the European Union in 1995, adopting the euro in 1999, stepping fully into the West. Yet it clung fiercely to neutrality, wary of NATO and cautious of its vast eastern neighbor, Russia. Not an enemy, but an unpredictable shadow. But shadows have a way of stretching into the present. The 21st century brought fresh storms, global upheaval, migration waves, climate crises, technological revolutions. Finland adapted swiftly, becoming a beacon in education and innovation. Its schools topped global rankings. Startups reshaped industries. Free internet access was declared a human right. The future seemed bright, yet the past lingered. A warning no one could afford to forget. Every March 19th, the nation pauses. Flags lowered, silent candles flicker on graves. Memories of war, loss, and the stolen lands of Karelia weigh heavy in the Finnish heart. They remember those who died for freedom, a painful lesson etched into their collective soul. And when Russia's aggression erupted again in 2022, Finland faced a harrowing choice: cling to neutrality or embrace a new alliance for survival. The invasion of Ukraine shattered old assumptions. For the first time in 80 years, Finland abandoned its neutrality. On April 4, 2023, it became the 31st member of NATO, a historic, reluctant pivot. They never wanted this path, but Russia's aggression left no alternative. Security trumped old loyalties, and Finland cast its lot decisively with the West. There was no turning back. Today, Finland stands as a nation forged by impossible choices. It has transformed what seemed like a curse, a land caught between giants, into a singular strength. To be between East and West means understanding both worlds, speaking both languages, acting as a bridge. This understanding was earned through centuries of occupation, revolution, war, and loss. But above all, it was earned through resilience, an unwavering sisu that refuses to break. Finland's identity is a living paradox. It is a land of endless summer nights and endless winter darkness, where ancient traditions like the sauna coexist with cutting-edge quantum computing. They believe in elves and trolls, yet lead the world in rational thought. They cherish silence and solitude, yet brew more coffee per capita than any nation. This intricate dance of contradictions is the secret to their survival, a complex tapestry woven from history's harshest threads. What allowed Finland to endure when it had no vast resources, no overwhelming population, no great wealth? The answer lies not in what the country possessed, but in what it refused to surrender: its soul, its identity, its sisu. The willingness to make unbearable choices, to hold the line against chaos and aggression, to embrace change when survival demanded it. This is Finland's true legacy, and it is a legacy still being written today. To understand Finland is to witness the power of resilience, the story of a people who refused to be broken, who turned hardship into strength, who protect freedom at any cost. It is a story of a nation that chose to stand tall, not by wealth or might, but through unyielding spirit and the courage to confront the darkest moments with clarity and resolve. Subscribe to Quiet History for more stories of humanity's most profound struggles and triumphs. How does a nation of just 5.5 million people stand unyielding amid the storm of empires and wars? What forces forge a people's spirit so fierce that they choose struggle over surrender? Who bears the weight of history when every choice means survival or extinction? Finland's story is one of relentless decisions, each a fork where freedom or oppression, identity or erasure, life or death hung in balance. And every time, the Finnish soul chose the harder path. Finland's geography was never a blessing. Its position was a constant challenge, a battleground between East and West. Yet nature itself was not the enemy. The true battle was waged by its people, stubborn, hard-working, honest. The Finns did not wait for miracles from the land or favors from neighbors. They built their destiny with their own hands, forging a future from sheer will. But at what cost? This was not a story of easy victories or quiet peace. It was a tale of blood and sacrifice, endured wars and losses that etched scars into the nation's very bones. Each generation faced brutal choices: to obey or rebel, to forget themselves or preserve their identity, to bow or to fight. There was no middle ground, no safe harbor. The price was paid in the currency of lives, but the prize was freedom, the one thing Finland could never surrender. Better to die standing than live on your knees. This was no empty slogan. It was a lived reality proven twice in the 20th century, when Finland stood alone against overwhelming foes. Twice, the tiny nation defied conquest, refusing to yield its spirit. Twice, it showed the world that a people who refuse to be broken can resist even the mightiest forces. But what does it mean to be free? Finland's story is a constant tightrope walk, balanced precariously between East and West, between the legacies of empire and the promises of modernity, between clinging to tradition and embracing change. To fall meant obliteration, to stand meant survival. And so the Finns learned to walk this line with unmatched skill. Their strength was not in arms or wealth, but in knowing precisely who they were and fiercely guarding that truth. Their honesty and humility, born of deep Protestant virtues, shaped a society unlike any other. Finns don't boast. They don't seek glory. They work quietly, thoroughly, valuing the craft itself as its own reward. This cultural DNA forged a nation of trust, where wallets left on benches are returned, promises are kept, and the law is respected. It is a society built on faith not only in God, but in one another, a rare treasure in a world rife with deception. Education became the cornerstone of this resilient spirit. Since the 19th century, every Finn was taught to read, not just to survive, but to understand, to question, to grow. This literacy was their shield, their weapon against oppression. It allowed them to preserve their language, their stories, their culture, even as powerful forces sought to erase them. Today, Finnish culture thrives, young people proud of their history, ready to face the future without denying the past. Yet the future remains fraught with uncertainty. Russia's shadow still looms unpredictable. Europe wrestles with crises that threaten stability. The world shifts beneath Finland's feet, demanding new choices: to join the collective security of the West or to guard its independence alone. Once again, the nation stands at a crossroads where every decision carries the weight of survival and the soul of a people. Finland is not a story of heroes or saints, but of ordinary people making extraordinary choices, living honestly, working diligently, loving their land fiercely, and caring deeply for their children. This simplicity is their greatness. Their history defies tragedy. War and suffering were met with resilience and rebirth. They refused victimhood, took responsibility for their fate, and built one of the world's most just and prosperous societies. And so Finland stands today, a symbol not of size or power, but of spirit, a testament to the unbreakable will of a people who refuse to be conquered, a beacon showing the world that you can lose territory, cities, even lives, but never the idea of freedom itself. And in that fierce choice lies the true power of Finland. With an What lessons does this small nation offer to a fractured world? That strength lies not in weapons or wealth, but in integrity and perseverance. That survival is a chain of irreversible decisions, each demanding courage and clarity. That freedom isn't given, it is won time and again by those who refuse to bow. Subscribe to Quiet History to uncover more stories where human spirit clashes with fate, shaping the course of history. What if the very system designed to nurture minds instead traps them? Finland's education is hailed as a global model, a beacon of freedom and trust. Schools don't drill or overwhelm students with exams. They teach thinking, analysis, creativity. Teachers are revered, not mere instructors. Children aren't ranked or crushed by grades. Each grows at their own pace. The result? A generation that loves learning, unafraid of school, unburdened by fear. But beneath this calm surface, a storm of challenges brews. This education system mirrors the Finnish soul. No violence, no pressure, just freedom balanced with responsibility. Finns believe humans are inherently good, not broken beings to be fixed or forced into molds. Instead, society creates conditions, offers tools, and steps back to watch potential bloom. It's a philosophy of trust in people, in their capacity to grow. This trust flows through every layer of Finnish life: government, police, neighbors, and the future itself. Yet trust is fragile. What happens when that faith is tested? Finland. But yeah. Finland stands at a crossroads. A society built on trust, freedom, and respect, yet shadowed by isolation, addiction, and despair. It must confront the ghosts of its past and the challenges of a changing world. Will it hold on to its ideals or be forced to reshape them? The stakes are nothing less than the soul of a nation. The wave of history crashes forward, and Finland must decide how to ride it or be swallowed whole. If this story of resilience and struggle moves you, subscribe to Quiet History. Together, we'll uncover the hidden layers behind the world's most compelling histories. What does it mean to live on the edge of 1,000 years of conflict? How does a nation reconcile peace with the shadow of war looming so close? Finland stands at this crossroads, where every choice echoes with weighty consequences. The relationship with Russia, an uneasy, fraught history, defines much of Finland's destiny. This is not just geography, it is a battleground of trust and fear. Finland remembers the wars, the occupations, the relentless pressure from its powerful neighbor. The scars run deep, etched into collective memory. Watching the unfolding tragedy in Ukraine, Finns see a terrifying reflection of what could happen to them. The fear is palpable. It is a fear born not of hatred, but of survival. This dread compels a fateful decision: joining NATO. NATO membership is no mere alliance. It is a lifeline, a shield against an unpredictable authoritarian giant. Finland chooses collective defense over isolation, pragmatism over hostility. This marks the symbolic end of an era, the era of balancing, neutrality, and the elusive special path. Now, Finland stands squarely with the West, a choice both liberating and burdensome.
Liberation from the constant gaze toward Moscow brings freedom and responsibility. Finland is no longer a bystander, but a committed ally, sharing the weight of collective security. Each generation bears the duty to prove itself worthy of freedom, a truth etched deeply into Finnish identity. The past is a stern teacher, reminding them that peace is fragile, earned, and never guaranteed. This lesson shapes a nation prepared to defend itself fiercely.
Finland maintains one of Europe's strongest armies relative to its population, embodying a realism born from harsh history. Universal conscription means every man learns to wield a weapon, ready at a moment's notice. This is not militarism. It is survival. Against vast, looming threats, readiness is the only path to peace. Finland's military doctrine is clear: deterrence through cost. The goal is simple but profound: to make any invasion so costly that no aggressor dares to try. This is defense in its purest form. Finland will never be the conqueror, only the guardian, every meter of its soil fiercely protected. The brutal lessons of the Winter War echo loudly here. A small army fighting on home ground can defeat a much larger force. The soldiers in Finnish lore are not heroes in shining armor, but ordinary men, tired, scared, flawed, who act because they must. This realism is embodied in Väinö Linna's The Unknown Soldier, a seminal work capturing the brutal truth of war from a Finnish perspective. Every Finn grows up with this story, recognizing in its pages the courage and fear of their ancestors. But the Finnish spirit is more than conflict and defense. It is a complex blend of ancient traditions and cutting-edge innovation. Saunas, forests, and folklore exist side by side with startups, artificial intelligence, and quantum physics discussions. This is a people who embody paradox, a harmony of silence and song, solitude and connection, old rune wisdom, and new technological frontiers. Sauna, for instance, is not merely a bath. It is sacred ritual, a place beyond words. Finns don't explain feelings. They act, or they remain silent, gazing over the lake. Their language embraces the power of silence. Words are often superfluous, and meaning lives in what remains unsaid. This quiet depth is a cornerstone of Finnish identity, a cultural richness that shapes their worldview. From Mika Waltari, whose historical novels like The Egyptian brought Finland to global fame, to director Aki Kaurismäki with his minimalist films, Finnish culture reveals a profound tension between simplicity and complexity. These creators reflect a nation that honors its past without being trapped by it, always looking forward while rooted in deep tradition. Every chapter of Finland's story is a testament to fateful decisions and their irreversible consequences. From the harsh winters of war to the digital age's promises and perils, Finns confront an uncertain future, armed with lessons of history and a steely resolve. In this delicate balance, they invite us to witness a nation's struggle to secure its freedom through courage, readiness, and an unyielding will to survive. If you want to dive deeper into stories like this, uncover more untold histories, and explore the forces shaping our world, subscribe to Quiet History,
because understanding the past is the only way to navigate the future. What if the very essence of a nation's soul hinges on silent moments? Imagine heroes who do not shout or fight, but sit quietly, drinking coffee, staring out windows. Nothing seems to happen, yet everything unfolds. This is life itself, ordinary, quiet, melancholic, but pierced by fleeting sparks of light. The question is, how does this stillness shape a people's fate? Aki Kaurismäki, the Finnish filmmaker, shows us a Finland stripped of illusions. Gray cities, empty streets, solitary souls wandering through shadows. It's a country not dressed in celebration, but draped in sober reality. Yet within that austerity flickers hope. His characters do not surrender. They rise. They move forward, chasing happiness like fragile flames in the dark. But what happens when the pursuit of hope clashes with the harshness of existence? Finland's story is riddled with ironies. Once the pride of mobile technology through Nokia, the giant who missed the smartphone wave and tumbled down, yet refused to vanish. Instead, it reborn itself as a titan in telecommunications, pioneering fifth-generation networks. This rebirth was no coincidence. It was a brutal choice between extinction and transformation. What does it take for a nation to pivot when the ground is crumbling beneath its feet? Then came the rise of tiny firms with global footprints. Supercell created games like Clash of Clans and Brawl Stars, capturing the imaginations and screens of billions. Rovio gifted the world Angry Birds. Linux, born from the mind of Linus Torvalds, a Finn, became the backbone of most servers worldwide. These are not just achievements. They are lifelines that connect Finland to the world. But how does such a small nation produce such sweeping innovation? The foundation lies in education, rigorous, inclusive, cultivating problem solvers and daring experimenters. Finnish engineers, designers, and programmers rank among the best globally. This education is not just knowledge. It is a weapon wielded against mediocrity and fear. Yet, education alone is powerless without the right soil. How does culture nourish such relentless creativity? Finland invests fiercely in research, startups, and innovation. Government aid that empowers without smothering. Freedom to create, to fail, to try again. Coupled with a fierce Finnish spirit, unyielding and perfectionist, the result is uncompromising quality. This is no accident. It is a calculated struggle against imperfection. But even this relentless drive can sow fractures. What is sacrificed in the quest for flawlessness? Gender equality is another cornerstone. Finland was the second country in the world to grant women the right to vote in 1906. Today, nearly half of the parliament is female. Women have led as prime ministers and presidents. Equal pay, equal roles, not through quotas, but through natural progression. Finnish society understands that talent knows no gender. But this balance is fragile. How easily could it tip under pressure? Parental leave is shared. Fathers take as much time as mothers. Child care is accessible and high quality, enabling parents to work knowing their children are safe. This shared responsibility strengthens families and communities. Work-life balance is sacred. Finns work to live, not live to work. Could this be the secret to their happiness? A happiness that does not bow to career ambition or sacrifice. Corruption is nearly non-existent.
Finland regularly ranks among the world's most honest countries. Transparency is law. Every politician's income is public. Conflicts of interest are forbidden. Bribery is met with brutal punishment. But beyond laws, it is culture. Corruption is shameful, a betrayal of society's trust. Trust is fragile. Once broken, society crumbles. Finns know this better than most. What will happen if that trust ever fractures? Ecology is no mere slogan. It is a lifeline. Finland pursues carbon neutrality, invests in renewable energy, protects vast forests, and cleans its lakes. The love for nature is tangible. They walk those very woods and swim in those waters. They fight not for politics, but for survival, so their children and grandchildren may inherit the same wild freedom. Can economic growth and ecological responsibility truly coexist? Finland insists they can. And now, look at the arc of history itself. Why do we still tell Finland's story? Because it is a story of hope. A small people surviving against empire's pressure. A story where identity is preserved through ruthless trials. Freedom demands sacrifice, yet without it, life loses meaning. Finland's journey from the edge to the center, from victim to master of its destiny, is a testament to human will. What choices will define the next chapters of this relentless saga? If you've been moved by Finland's story of resilience and hope, subscribe to Quiet History. Discover how great histories are built on the quiet decisions, the defiant moments that change everything. What does it mean to wait for centuries? To hold your breath through generations? The Finns did exactly that. They did not rush. They did not gamble on fleeting moments. They conserved their strength, preserved their language, nurtured their people. When the moment came, they were ready. But readiness alone was not enough. Would they seize the chance or let it slip away into history? The lesson is brutal. Empires fall, circumstances shift, and new opportunities emerge from the rubble. Yet survival demands patience and resilience. Finland's story teaches every small nation a harsh truth. Do not despair. Hold fast to your identity, your culture, your unity, because the moment to act will come, and only those prepared will survive the storm. But how do you prepare without losing yourself? The Finnish Civil War tore the nation apart. Reds and whites slaughtering each other in a bitter, fratricidal conflict. The wounds ran deep, the hatred palpable. Yet the Finns made a choice that defied the bloodshed. Reconciliation. It was neither swift nor easy, but they understood that a divided people is doomed. The enemy is outside, not within. Will forgiveness be strong enough to bind a fractured nation? They buried their grudges, not in oblivion, but in wisdom, remembering without revenge, moving forward without chains from the past. This was not weakness, it was survival. Finland's history teaches unity, not as a romantic ideal, but as a pragmatic necessity. Can a nation truly heal when its own people remain enemies? The Finns chose to heal. Realism, not romanticism, defines Finland's path. They never deluded themselves about the world's harsh rules.
Big powers dictate terms. Small nations obey or perish. Yet Finland carved a third way, outward submission paired with inner freedom. Yield in the trivial, stand firm in the vital. Maneuver, balance, survive. This was not cowardice, but cunning. What price is worth paying for survival? Heroic death may be beautiful, but what comes after? Finland chose not the glory of sacrifice, but the hard grind of living and fighting another day. Every choice was a gamble with fate. Accept Christianity or cling to pagan roots. Speak Finnish or switch to Swedish. Resist Russia or submit. Fight for independence or remain under empire. Each decision shaped a nation's destiny. Could they bear the weight of these choices? The Civil War's aftermath posed a terrifying question. Continue the bloodshed or seek peace? The Finns chose peace, but the scars remained. Later, facing the Soviet Union's shadow, they confronted another brutal dilemma. Fight or capitulate? Later still, neutrality or NATO? Each fork in the road demanded courage and foresight. Each time, Finland chose the difficult but necessary path. What would you choose when every option costs lives? Freedom was never free for the Finns. It was bought with blood, land, and lives. They do not take liberty for granted. Every day they prove their worthiness through voting, paying taxes, serving in the military, obeying laws. Freedom demands responsibility. Can a society survive when its people are free but reckless? Finland's answer is clear. Freedom without responsibility is parasitism. The fate of a nation is the sum of its ancestors' choices. Each generation faced impossible decisions. Embrace a new faith or hold to old beliefs. Preserve language or adopt another. Resist or submit. Reconcile or continue the feud. Fight or surrender. Finland's story is a chain of fateful decisions, each one harder than the last. And yet, they forged a country to be proud of. But what new trials await? Now, Finland stands at another crossroads. Climate change threatens the North more than the South. Globalization blurs borders and identities. The legacy of tough choices continues. Will Finland adapt and survive again? The stakes have never been higher. The future demands the same courage, the same wisdom, the same unity. Will history repeat itself, or will the Finns write a new chapter? If this story of relentless struggle, impossible choices, and enduring spirit moved you, subscribe to Quiet History, because the past is never silent, and the future depends on what we learn from it.